Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and today I'm going to show you how to make a set of placemats and a table runner that's suitable for kids. Kids love to have their own things, and having their own placemat is no exception. So this is a quick, simple project. Let's get on and show you how to do it. So what you need is a charm pack, and I have motors on the go, and I chose this because this is for little kids and it's got lots of vehicles, trucks and things like that on there, so I thought that was quite a neat little charm pack. If you don't have a charm pack, you can cut your own charm squares from your yardage that you have on hand, and we have a video on how to do that, and I'll put a link in the description below. Now you're also going to need some backing, and I've chosen a backing from the range, so this will match nicely with these charm squares that I have here. Now I've also splurged out, and I've bought I think there's 5 different fabrics that also go with this range. You don't have to do that. You can use your binding from whatever you have on hand, or you could even use just a little bit of the backing for your binding. I didn't do that because I felt it was too fussy, and so I've gone with the plainer fabrics, and I will colour match them to what I'm doing. You'll also need some batting. Now choose a low loft batting because you don't want anything that's too thick and bouncy, because otherwise with little kids things will just tip over. Now all of the measurements will be on the website, and I will put a link in the description below. So I've decided to colour coordinate my placemats, so I went through the charm pack and I've selected all the colours that match, and I've got them laid out here. Now what you can do is, once you've got your squares laid out, is take a photo with your iPad or your phone, so that you know how you've got it, because once you gather these up they may get out of order. And if you're really creative, you could put labels here with the child's name on one of the squares, or you could embroider their name on them. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep this really simple so that we can get through it, and for beginners they don't have anything to fuss around with. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to gather those up, and then I'm going to lay out the table runner. So you can see here that I've laid out the charm squares for the table runner, and anything that has a directional pattern I've actually put so that it faces outwards, so each child will have a picture to look at. Now it's 2 by 5, and with the leftover squares I've just folded them in half. This is just to give you a visual representation. I'll go through all this in detail when we get to making up the table runner. So each of these will be cut in half, so there will be enough of those squares to go around the whole table runner. And I have a square left over which I'll use for the cornerstones, which in each of the corners. So let's put together one of the placemats. So I've laid them out how I want them to look, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew the two rows together. Now firstly we'll start by lining up these two squares, and I'll sew down here with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we'll attach this one to the other side here, again lining up, making sure everything's nice and even, and we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam, and we'll do exactly the same with the bottom row. So there you are, I've sewn the two rows together, and I'll just show here I've pressed the seams, one row going this way, one row going that way, and that will mean we can nest the seams nicely, and we'll get nice crisp seams when we sew them together. So what we do is we take one row, place it on top of the other, and see what I mean about how these will now fit together nicely. So we'll just pin this together, and then we'll sew along here with a 1/4 inch seam, making sure when you're sewing that the seams don't tip up, because they are going in different directions. So there you are, it's all sewn together, and you want to do exactly the same process for the other 3 placemats. So now I'm going to work on the table runner. So I've got my table runner set out now how I want it. I've made a few changes, so you'll notice it looks different to how it did earlier. Now the thing is, I'm going to cut these pieces in half, because these are going to be the border bits, and they will be attached around the edge once this is all sewn together. Now I'm going to cut each of these squares in half, and remember we do have a square left over that we're going to use for cornerstones, which we'll be cutting into 4 pieces, but we'll do that later. Now you can stack them if you wish and cut a number at a time, but I'll just show you using one. So it's a 5 inch square, so I'm going to line my ruler up on the edge here at the 2.5 inch mark, and I'm just going to cut this in half. I'm going to repeat that process with all of these squares, and that will give me 2 pieces for each, and then I can sort them around the table runner when I'm ready to put it together. Now this piece that's going to be the cornerstone, I've placed it on my rotating mat because it makes it easier to cut. I've got the line here on the 2.5 inches, and I'm just going to cut it in half. And then what I'll do is I'll just turn that round line it up on the 2.5 mark again. And there we are, I've got my 4 cornerstone pieces. Okay, so I've got it all cut into pieces now, and I've laid it out how I'm going to put it together. Now, as you know, normally we sew in rows, but this time I'm going to sew in columns. So I will bring this cornerstone down here and add it to the first piece of the border, sew it with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'll continue down the row. And I'll do that for each row until they're all sewn together. Okay, so I've sewn the columns together, and I just thought I'd leave these 3 to show you how I've pressed the seams. So in this column I've pressed them one way, then the next column is opposing, so they're coming down this way. These ones are going back up, and I've done that with each of the columns. Okay, so we'll just turn them over now. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this first row, this first column, and I'm going to sew it to the second one. And because our seams are pressed the way they are, everything will nest together nicely and we'll have nice crisp seams. Now I usually sew everything together in lots of 2, so I'll sew those 2 together, these 2, these 2. Now because there's a third one, I'll just add that to that row and that column, and then I'll sew the lot together. Okay, so now we've got the tops of our placemats and our table runner done. So now we're going to add the batting and the backing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some 505 adhesive spray just to join my layers together. And I've put down a piece of paper here just to protect my mat. Now I have my backing and my batting. And my backing is face down, you'll notice. And then the top of my table runner is face up. So what I'm going to do is just peel these back. Just do half, and I'm going to give this a spray. Okay, and then I'll bring my batting over and smooth it all down. And we want to make sure we don't have any wrinkles. Okay. And I'll do the other side. I'll just remove the top for a moment and make sure that this is all nicely laid out, which it's not. Okay, we want to get all those wrinkles out. Actually, what I'm going to do is give this a press so that the 2 stick together nicely. So you can see that's nice and wrinkle-free now that it's been pressed. So now we'll just flip that over. And we'll bring the top in, and we're going to do the same thing again. I should have actually mentioned to remove the top before we sprayed the bottoms, but you get the idea. Okay, so again, just rip it in half, and this time I'm going to spray. Okay, smooth it out with your hands. We're going to press this as well. It helps if you get it down nice in the first place. Right, but then we fold this half back. And here we go. Alright, so I'll give that a press now, and then we're ready to do the next bit. So we've created the sandwich with our table runner, and now we need to do the same with all 4 placemats. So we'll do exactly the same thing. We'll just put our backing down, our batting and our top, and we'll just spray those and smooth them out. So now it's time to decide how you want to quilt these. You can either stitch in the ditch down each of the seam lines, or you can do 1/4 inch from each seam line, and that always looks nice. But I'm going to do mine like this time. And there'll be instructions on the website on how to do this. I do have my placemat. You'll do it on all 4 placemats plus your table runner. And I have my lines marked on there already, just to make a start. Okay, I'm ready to go and quilt this now, but as you'll notice, I've actually put some quilting pins in here just to help the layers stay in place. The adhesive spray does work, but it's always nice to pin as well, just to give you that added security. Alright, so now that we've got it all quilted, it's time to trim it, and I'm placing my 2 1/4 line along the seam line here, and you might just have to tug it a little bit just to make sure that it's sitting right. And there we go. And we just trim that off there. And now I'm just going to turn it round. And do the same thing again. I'll have to take a couple of cuts at this because it's longer. There you go. Bring it down. Spool it down towards you. Again, measure it up on the 2 1/4 line. Okay, and I'll just continue doing that and trimming the rest of it. Okay, so I've trimmed these up and everything looks nice once it's trimmed. So now all we have to do is add the binding. Now we have a link to the video below on how to do the binding for a table runner and a placemat, and this is what you'll end up with. So there we are, the 4 placemats and the table runner are now finished. And so if you've enjoyed this tutorial, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It certainly helps our channel to grow.